Hi everyone, I'm John from Davison, and today I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about Ripple Delay 1.1 Beta. So you can download this by going to the Davison website and clicking on Ripple Delay. This is the new beta version of Ripple Delay Pro, and if you haven't seen, all my software is $12 now. You can read more about it here. But the purpose of this video is to basically walk through the manual for Ripple Delay 1.1 Beta, as well as demo it. So this will be just like a very comprehensive review of the features and how you use the plugin. That I feel will be very useful. Now the first things first, this might be kind of small on your screen. And if we go to the UI scaling setting in the settings, we can make it bigger. And I'm also going to make my face smaller so I'm no longer covering it. Okay, awesome. So when you open Ripple Delay in your DAW, so here I have it open in Ableton in another window. This is the default preset that you'll be greeted with. You can also go to the menu and do init preset to get this, okay? I just wanna show you, before we get into everything, just what it does if we play a sound. So you hear an echo from our initial sound that has a pattern, and that pattern is kind of down here at the bottom left. And we see that the amplitude decays. And that amplitude decay is something that we can control with this amplitude envelope. All right. Let's talk about the plugin itself. So Ripple Delay is a curve-based multi-tap delay plugin that adds variation to echoes with waves of parameter modulation called ripples. That's why it's called Ripple Delay. And we'll see what this means later. And it's a very powerful tool that you have that you don't really get in a lot of delays, and I haven't really seen it in multi-tap delays. So because of this, you have just like tons of really cool capabilities for making really unique delay sounds, and also delay sounds that sound kind of like a more natural or variational version of just like a normal delay. Basically, it's less boring. You can add more interesting things. So the plugin is divided into three main sections. Those are the shaping section, where you control the general filter, like frequency, bandwidth, the amplitude fall off, panning, as well as some pitch. Then there's the distortion, where we can add distortion. Now, if you are if a previous Ripple Delay user, this is all new. The previous version of Ripple Delay pretty much just had the shaping sound engine. The new one has distortion and a new mix mode, which we'll see. It has tons of cool graphs. As you can see, you can switch between these modes in the top left of the plugin, with most of your work being done in the shape and distortion mode, and mix mostly being used to, like it's called, check the mix and do some fine tuning there. Yeah, then going into the panels, we have on the bottom left this pattern panel, and then just some globals, which are just kind of like settings that affect everything else in the plugin, regardless of the rest of these panels. And just as an overview of the algorithm, so if you are unfamiliar with a multi-tap delay, we have input audio that gets put into, you can think of it almost like a tape that's coming out from the input, and you have these taps coming out of it that get mixed together. And so the first tap is going to be played first, but as the audio moves from left to right, then the next tap will play, and then the next tap after that. So rather than having echoes that feed back into each other, like just having one echo, here you have the audio kind of being picked up at these different taps that are placed at different places depending on how far away the echoes, how far away we want the echoes to be. And the really powerful thing here with having all of these taps, which Ripple Delay has 32 of them, is that you can control the individual sound of like each individual echo, and, you know, with like really all of the detail. You can control all of the elements of that specific echo. But you know, one of the things that I tried to do with this is that rather than forcing you then to, if you want to do just like an amplitude fall off like this, rather than forcing you to have to go through and edit each individual echo, you can just edit the general shape of how all of those echoes interact with these curves. So that's really nice. But yeah, this is the algorithm at a high level. Each tap passes through the shaping filter and also distortion, not necessarily in this order. We can have distortion before or after the filter, as we'll see later. And yeah, the sound from these taps gets outputted to the output mixer and then to the audio. There's also a loop tap that allows you to get sort of these feedback delay sounds. This is also a new feature in Ripple Delay 1.1 that was partially implemented but not well in the original version of Ripple Delay. So previously, your delay feedback went from the very last tap to the very first tap. That's not very flexible. So now you can have it go from just like this, what's it? Can I count? Tap number 8 back to the first tap. You can also have these few taps kind of play and then have a loop only in this section here. It's really cool. That adds just like so much like sculpting capabilities. I'm so excited about this update. So yeah, taking a look at these new features, we have that configurable feedback delay. We have the distortion engine. Another thing that I want to mention is ducking in the mix, which we'll look at later. This is going to be very useful if you're working with guitar or vocals. Basically, echoes can become really distracting when you want to, for example, sing and have your words actually be heard. But then when you stop singing, that's when you want the echoes to come in. So that's what this is for. Very, very useful feature. I've loved playing my guitar with it. In addition, we also have improved ripples. So what I'd like to point out here is that ripples, each individual ripple has its own rate and size. This is huge compared to the old algorithm, because the old algorithm had a tendency to sound very cyclical. Basically, all of the modulation would kind of happen in the same kind of like all of the cycles. If your modulation was like quarter notes of modulation of you know, like the frequency going up and down, everything was there, was at that like same modulation rate. And as a result of that, it kind of had this like, felt like you were on a boat just kind of going up and down. And by removing that limitation and letting all of the ripples have their own individual rates, now you can make these like really complex sounding modulated echoes that don't feel like they have that sort of like seasick feeling. It just feels very like you don't even notice that it's just the parameters going back and forth. It's been wonderful to work with. Awesome. I think you're going to love it. Let's talk about installation. So when you purchase the plugin on the Davison store, you're going to get some emails. And one of them is going to contain like license information and also receipt. But you can access all of this at davisynth.com. Once you're logged in, if you go to the My Plugins menu just at the top of the page, you'll be able to download and activate all of your software. You'll have the serial number there that you can copy. So you can manage it all there. Very, very easy. I've put a lot of work into improving the website so this stuff gets a lot easier, and I want the purchase experience to be good. Installation, at least for the beta, I think I'm going to stick with you just copy the file to the correct VST or audio unit directory. And yeah, the installer on Windows, last time I tried it, was giving me a lot of issues with Windows thinking that it was malware. I don't know why, and that's really annoying, but if you can just copy the VST to your DAW's like VST search folder, that's the easiest. And the same with Mac for audio units. So I think that's how we're going to do it. You activate the plugin by putting in your serial number. You do need internet to activate this but you don't need to be connected to the internet every time you use it. That would be like super annoying. I understand you have laptops and not internet connection all the time, so don't worry about that. But just the first time you activate it, you need to be connected to the internet. All right, so let's talk about these automation envelopes. So this like amplitude thing that we saw, that's the ripple that I'm editing. That's why you can't see it. The amplitude envelope, okay? So like I mentioned, as opposed to controlling each of the echo taps individually, which can get really annoying if you have 32 of them to manage, we just determine their value based on that sort of curve that we've drawn. Okay, so your automation envelope, that curve, is going to have these different points on it for each of those echoes. And so if we look at this on the left graph, we see these that we have these like little like jagged lines there. Each of those lines that goes straight across represents one of the echoes. Whereas here on the right, you can see that the curve is smooth. Now, to make it easier to know which echo you're editing, as long as you're in snap mode, so if you're in snap mode, you can actually snap your like drawing capabilities so that they'll line up on one of the echoes. So if I just wanted to make like this singular echo have that singular amplitude, then you can totally do it, right? Like it's just, you have snap mode on, makes it a lot simpler. This is another quality of life feature that I added that was not included in the previous version. This update really is focused on taking all the things that were like not quite up to par with the previous plugin and really pushing the envelope and making it like a really good experience. And I really hope that you can get that out of that. So the interface here works by, basically you have this envelope that your echoes will follow, but sometimes you want to draw it and you maybe want to decrease the strength a little bit. Okay, so that's what this is. Sometimes you also want to offset this, right? So you have this like vertical offset here. And the strength can actually go negative, so that's pretty cool. So you have like both positive and negative strength as well as that offset. But by default, if you want your echo tap like values to match what you're drawing, you can just set the offset to 0 and your strength to 100%. Okay? Cool. We also have the feedback mode settings, which I'm going to go into when we actually cover that section of it, because it's really cool the types of effects that you can achieve with that. So yeah, I mentioned the curve editor. You can add more points. You can have them kind of like, you can change their smoothness. It should all be pretty familiar, especially if you're used to, these curve editors, you see them a lot in audio software. So this should be pretty familiar. Let's talk about ripple now. So the goal of ripple is to make these like modulated echoes where like each echo really sounds unique. So that way your brain, when you're hearing it, is not just thinking, oh, that's an echo effect. It sounds like all the echoes sound the same, right? And the key here, like the key like value add of that when you are working on a track is that you can now add a ton of like depth, like spatial depth, like perceived depth to your sounds without having to pass them through something like a reverb. My problem with reverbs is that sometimes, actually a lot of times, they like filter the sound. They change the way that your like instrument sounds. So you get this depth, but now it's like changed the sound, right? And that doesn't happen to me as much with echoes. So I've found that with this like modulated echo approach, you can get sort of the best of both worlds there, of you get this like added depth, but without it affecting like the timbre of your sound. And because you have like the full control over each echo tap in ripple delay, if you have any issues with like a particular echo tap sounding weird, you can fix that in the plugin. It's really nice having like this really powerful control. But yeah, let's take a look at this. So right now, this is our amplitude function, and it's basically exactly what we've drawn here. But what I'm gonna do is just increase the ripple envelope amount. And now you can see that the amplitude, there's like this wave moving across it. Now, ripple is controlled by the rate and the wavelength, which you can think of as the size. It's like literally if you took like the size of that wave, you measured it, it's like the length of that. So globally, we have access to this, okay? But also, we have access to the ripple size locally for each of these different ripples. So in doing so, because we have like this like local control, basically all the ripples can be sort of independent from one another. And I really want to highlight this, that this is like pretty different than what it was like in the previous version. So in the previous version, if I had the same ripple size, same ripple rate, you'd basically see that like these ripples here for the frequency and the amplitude are the same. You could change the phase, but it's still, they're like cyclical in the same way. Whereas now, by like changing the rate and the size independently of one another, these two ripples really, it doesn't sound like it's like the same, like you don't get that seasick effect, if you know what I mean, where like it's just kind of like going back and forth, the whole thing. It's like, it's so much nicer to work with now. So I really want to highlight that. And yeah, you can set it up so that you only get ripples for certain taps just by messing with the envelope, and that's really cool. Again, super powerful with this curve editor approach. You can get some really sweet effects doing this. Yeah, so this is the interface. It's pretty similar. You can also, quantize the time or have it be like a continuous time reference, meaning it can kind of take on anything. And I also want to highlight time ripple, which is, not only are we controlling the frequency, bandwidth, amplitude of like a filter, we can also control the time at which these echo taps actually happen. So what happens if you modulate time is that you're effectively modulating the pitch as well. And so this is how in other like echo effects that you've used, when they have this kind of like pitch modulation that goes back and forth, that's how they're accomplishing it. It's not pitch modulation, it's time modulation, but it does the same thing. So I'm gonna play a sound. And we can hear the effect of these like ripples, but I'm just gonna turn these down for both of these, and we're just gonna play with the time ripple, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, that's probably enough amplitude that we'll be able to hear. I'm gonna turn up the time ripple for, so that basically the first tap is not gonna have much of this, but then the next ones are gonna have like more aggressive time ripple. Let's play this. Isn't that cool? And then we can also change the ripple rate so it's faster. And you'll also notice that when we change the rate, because it's actually time modulation and not frequency modulation, it basically, when we increase the rate, the amount of that modulation also changes. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're working with this, is that sometimes you'll change your rate or your amplitude, and it might change the amount at which that pitch effect is being applied. Just something to keep in mind. But yeah, as you can see, we can get some like pretty big like sweeps. Yeah, this is really nice for adding like almost like chorus effects, or like, effects where you want to have like the effect of like multiple voices. And especially with like very short echoes. You can even hear that like it sounds like it's the same. Like it's like it's just okay, that's the same sound being repeated a bunch. Whereas when you add the time modulation, you know, even without getting super aggressive with it, you can hear that it sounds different. Like it's like each of these sounds kind of unique. So like without getting super aggressive with our time to where you might not interpret it as a different pitch, you know, you can still make it feel like they're not exact copies. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it adds a little bit of like a fatness to it. So that's pretty cool. It's like one of my favorite features of the plugin, but that's been there since the beginning. So next, let's talk about the shaping engine, which is this first thing that we've been playing with really. And because I'm going through the manual in chronological order, that's why we're going to talk about it. So we have our filter here, and this is just sort of like a peaking filter. And what I'm going to do to demonstrate the shape is just turn down the bandwidth. So what we'll see is that we have this first tap, which is disabled right now. If I enable it, then it'll be that color. We have this first tap, and we can see that it's basically like 0 amplitude and then like a peak, and we can control the bandwidth of that peak. And that bandwidth can get quite wide to the point where it's effectively covering like from 0 to 22 kilohertz, or like whatever your sample rate is. So it's effectively just like a full filter. And so then if you want to make it low pass versus high pass, you can actually change the frequency. So if we make the filter cutoff down here, then it's kind of like a low pass filter by playing with the bandwidth, right? So it's a low pass filter. And if we want to make it a high pass filter, we do this. And that's kind of cool because now you can kind of make it go from being a low pass filter to being a high pass filter. See what I'm saying? It's going from low pass filter to high pass filter. We can hear how that sounds. Let's see. I'm actually going to decay the amplitude just a little bit. So you hear how it went like wow, like it went. I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive, I think, with the bandwidth here. So it's kind of like a little bit of a filter sweep in the echoes. Isn't that cool? So you can get cool effects like that. And like all of this is thanks to the fact that it is a multi-tap delay. You can't really do this in just like a normal delay because like, if you high pass a signal that's already been low passed, it's not gonna work. So you need the original sound in order to accomplish that. So that's one of the beauties of this being a multi-tap delay. But yeah, so we have this like nice 3D visualizer that we can use to visualize the filter transmission and then the taps and like their amplitude and stuff. So that's really nice. We also have these graphs, which you've seen me editing. We don't need to go through that, but basically you can select these different parameters here that you want to edit, and then you can edit their parameters on the right, and you can see the graphs of the actual echoes that are being played here on the left. All right, next let's move into the distortion engine. And so to demonstrate this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use a preset that I made that I'm going to release along with this version. Now these presets, this is a new bank of presets. I'm making basically like classic, ping pong, pitch, reverb, and like cool rhythm presets. as opposed to having just like a big thing of factory presets, which was kind of how the previous version had it. They'll be kind of subdivided into more categories this time around. So let's talk about the distortion engine. And also in this case, you'll notice that instead of having 32 taps, I only have 5. That's because I've dragged this like loop right to here. If I had it like this, we would have all 32 taps, okay? But only 2 of them are enabled. But I'm gonna keep it at what it's at. This will also be a good one to demonstrate the feedback, but yeah, let's first take a look at the distortion engine. So distortion off. This is the effect that we get. And notice that even though I only have 2 taps, it's kind of going back, it's like feeding back in on itself and having this like infinite decay. That's because of this like loop back that we have here. It's kind of looping from here to here. And so that's how you have that infinite decay. But yeah, now let's add the distortion in. Isn't that nice? You get like some like nice distorted echoes and stuff. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so there are a few distortion settings you might want to care about. So firstly, we have our distortion plugin or our distortion function. So we can do soft clip. We can get a little bit more aggressive with hard clip. Which I just realizing that's really loud now. We can do some wave folding. There's also this like sine wave folding. There you can hear kind of how those different ones sound. I plan on adding more functions for the like full like non-beta release, but yeah, it's kind of where we are now. And yeah, so then we have 2 parameters. So as opposed to the shape where we have these like 5, we have 2 parameters, which are the drive and the mix. The drive determines basically how aggressive this is going to be. And the mix is just sort of a dry wet mix of that drive or of that like driven filter. So if we just have no drive, this is what we get. And I'm actually just going to turn the drive feedback to 0. Yeah, that's kind of what we get. And that's with drive. Now, if we have no mix, it's just the dry sound. So this is the distortion engine. It is a super cool way to add these nice little like saturated infinite decay echoes or just like little peaks of saturation anywhere in your pattern. So that's been super fun and just like a great way to add extra harmonic character to your sound. This paired with that filter and the fact that you can have it like before versus after the filter, and you can have maybe like you can have like a super distorted sound going into a very like thin in sort of bandwidth filter. You can get these like cool like filter plus distortion effects. Yeah, so that's really fun. All right, next let's take a look at the mixing engine. And this is kind of where I'm going to show off an algorithm. And I don't know if this is an algorithm that I've invented for the first time, but let's take a listen. So we're just going to go to levels. I'm going to set the wet output to none, okay? So let's just take a look at the input and output parts. Basically, you have your dry input and your wet output. So like this is the input to the plugin, this is the output from the plugin. Okay? And then over here, just above these levels, you have your standard sort of like polar vector scope. What I'm gonna do real quick in Ableton is I'm just gonna throw on what's it called? A utility. And that's just gonna let me basically like pan this left and right. So audio effects, utility. And I'm saying this because I want to demonstrate something. Okay, so I'm gonna pan it to the right. So our polar vector scope is doing kind of what we expect. We also see that this thing here is doing something interesting. You have this like right, this like right, left there. And yeah, I just want to take a moment to explain like this big guy in the middle. So this is, I'm calling it the Realms visualizer. It might be a world first. I don't know if this algorithm has existed. I've like tried to find it and I don't know. But yeah, so I was reading a lot about how our brains interpret sounds, like the, you know, your ears, right? You have two ears and they have these little hairs in them that kind of vibrate at different frequencies, like specific frequencies, right? And you can interpret based on like you're hearing the left and the right ear and like using that information and the frequencies and like if they're like in versus out of phase, you can sort of determine where a sound is. You can like localize a sound that way. It's really cool. So my idea was, what if we make a sort of a spatial visualizer where we have like for each frequency, we can say like, okay, how panned is it to the left versus the right? Right, so that's kind of like if you have a sound over here, it's going to be louder in your right ear than in your left ear. But then there's also the phase of that sound that your brain also uses to tell kind of like where it is in space. So the other axis is the mid versus side of that sound. So we're taking into account the phase information of that particular frequency. So when we add an echo that can like fill the space, in this case I've gone into the reverb, and actually let's do the subtle clean room echo. I like this one a lot. It's like a very subtle, but it's very cool. So we have our dry sound, which I'm just going to center real quick. We're going to center it. See what happens when I drag the wet. Okay, so you can see like there is width to the sound in the polar vector scope, and if you've used one of these before, like you know that, you know, basically anything in this region and this region over here means that you're going to have some you know, side component to your sound, and we're going to interpret that as sort of being like out of phase, and we use it for the spatial stuff. But the Realms visualizer also shows that. So if you have a signal that's just very mid and in the middle, that's what it looks like. And you can see that this visualizer actually reveals a little bit more information about the sound than the one on the right. So just like listening to that sound, I want you to hear how it goes like kind of goes back and forth between two things. I want you to look at the visualizer on the right. When it goes to that, you know, like when it goes kind of back and forth, it oscillates a little bit. And I want you to look at the Realms visualizer. I want you to notice that when those frequencies sort of align in this like phase thing, and you know, where they basically are kind of, it like sound, you can hear like all the frequencies going and like kind of spatially orienting themselves in your mind, sort of slightly left of center. Okay, just if you close your eyes, or like, you know, looking at the scopes and taking that into consideration, I want you to listen to this again. So the standard polar vector scope, sure, the shape changes a little bit, but we don't really see how like those frequencies are going and coalescing in space in the same way that the realms visualizer does. I also want you to notice when we like, you have these like little pockets of like frequencies in different parts of the space whenever we play a note. Basically what I'm trying to say is it's really cool. It's another way to visualize space, and like I'm super excited about it. I think it's an awesome algorithm, and I was really happy when I saw the results from it. Yeah, so that's the Realms visualizer. And you also saw the mix. So we have an input to the delay. This basically controls how much of the input is going into the delay algorithm. Then you have your dry output. So this is just showing the wet component only. So what you can see is that we have some like left-right, the sound is just panning a little bit. And actually we do see that, right? Our sound is panning. We also see this like time modulation. Actually, let's see what happens if we don't do the time modulation. You see how those frequencies, you can like literally see these little blobs of frequencies that are just moving left and right, but they're not filling the full sort of mid to side space. It's just these like localized blobs. Whereas when we add this, we see like a lot more movement when we add just like even a little bit of time modulation. Like not really enough to really to notice it a whole lot, but it's still just enough that it like adds to that space filling effect, I should say. Yeah, you can see how kind of like the by like mixing the dry sound in with this like wet output here, we can really transform the way that you would perceive this in space when you're trying to add depth. This is a really good plugin if you want to add depth to your tracks, like super good for that. But yeah, let me get to the actual features though. So yeah, very important, because we have a lot of echoes that are being played. We have a compressor, right? You kind of need this, or else you're gonna clip all the time. Yeah, this is the compressor. It's pretty standard. I'm just gonna get like let's see, cool repeats. If we like, oh man, I would have to really demonstrate it with like a really aggressive like. You get the picture. It's a compressor. Yeah, that's what's going on. Yeah, so we got threshold, drive, slope, knee, attack, and release. And now I want to talk about ducking, right? This is a sick feature. And I'm just going to load, it's Tech Ping Pong. This is a good one to demonstrate this with. So For ducking, you might be trying to play something and you have this like sort of long tail echo that like it sounds sick. It sounds so cool, but every time you play a new note, it's just kind of mixing with that and it's getting really distracting. So it's like they kind of pile up on top of each other and get like way too distracting. So when we decrease the threshold, we're kind of saying like, okay, once the sound gets above this threshold, I want you to cut the volume, all right? So did you hear that? I'll do it again. I'm actually gonna set the gain reduction so that we reduce the echo 100%. Pretty cool. Now another feature I added was, so okay, that attack release envelope, you might not be happy with it. And so let's try increasing the release time, right? Because it was kind of, and we'll decrease the attack time because it seemed that like the release was just kind of happening very suddenly. All right, but like, suppose you're a little bit unhappy with that ramp, right? You have this curve here, so check this out. So now you saw that like the way that the it like went from that gain reduction back to normal was following a curve, and you can also add other points to this. So like you can be like kind of artsy if you want. Right? Like there's so many possibilities here. It's so cool. There's also additional smoothing just to quell some like transients. And then yeah, you can adjust the threshold. But yeah, this basically allows you to tune that like with so much detail. And you're gonna find that this is going to make the difference between being happy and being unhappy with like a ducking effect for a guitar or vocal. Because I tried to come up with an envelope that just like sounded good in all of the cases when I was playing my guitar. And I'm like, I think I just need to make this a curve also. And that ended up allowing me to just, whenever I was like, I want it to just like fade out just like a little bit more like this, or like just like a little bit less like here, but also still be really aggressive. Having it have its own curve and giving the user the flexibility to control that ended up making the difference. It's such a sick feature. It's so good. Yeah, awesome feature. The ducking works really well. All right, so now let's talk about the pattern editor. The pattern editor here, which I'm just gonna reload Tech Ping Pong just so we can play around with the pattern. Okay, so the pattern editor has basically the left and right channels. Right? You can imagine like your left and right echoes here, which I'm gonna clear real quick. Let's add one left echo and then two right echoes. Okay? You get the picture. The pattern that you select, right, ends up being the pattern that gets played with these echoes. We also have this triplet mode. So you can imagine like having like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Right, so that's really cool. Just having the triplets there, and you can kind of get these like polyrhythm echoes that way. It's pretty fun to play with. It gives a lot more flexibility. Yeah, so you click to enable or disable. There's also the ability to randomize these, which is just so nice. like there's so many times where I'm like, I want a pattern. I don't want to draw it. You can just randomize it. It's so nice. Yeah. And then there are the loop in and out points, which we kind of referenced before. And yeah, you can also edit the timing, which we also saw here. You know, you can make it like 1/32, really fast, 64th. You can make it reference to like milliseconds, like 10 milliseconds. This is really helpful if you're trying to do like reverb effects. You make it triplet time. Okay, so you have kind of like all of that control there. All right, so now let's talk about the feedback loop. This is how we get these echoes that sort of fade forever. And what you'll see is that in each of the envelope editors, you have this feedback amount slider, okay? And what that's doing is that's setting the feedback tap. So let's just go to a classic and smooth fade to crunch. That's not the one that I wanted. Maybe let's just stick with fuzzy decay. We're gonna turn the distortion off though, okay? All right, and let's make it 1/16. So, right now, if I were to play this like this, we would hear two sounds. Or nope, because I don't have the wet on. Let's put the dry on. Let's make the dry on. Okay? So you hear the dry sound followed by this wet sound. And then I'm going to add this guy here. Let's put it here. Here in this loop, okay? So we hear 3 echoes. So we hear our initial followed by the 2 actual echoes. So we hear the dry sound followed by 2 echoes. And I think just for this case, I'm gonna actually mute the dry sound and put this first tap on. Okay? So we have those 3 sounds, da-da-da, okay? Now, if we increase the feedback amount for the amplitude, what this is saying is that when we feed back from here to here, we want to do that with an amplitude of 60%. Let's make it 100% real quick, just so we can hear that. And this is helped by the fact that we have set the feedback amount for both the frequency and the bandwidth. And you're hearing kind of that filter sort of decay there, right? So we'll do that again, but in this case with like a much smaller bandwidth. Isn't that cool? And so you can get these like, and if we set the frequency like up more, we can make it brighter. So that's how you get those infinite fade out effects. Now that's if you set the feedback mode to custom. When you set the feedback mode to custom, the bandwidth and the amplitude or frequency value, just anything of that last tap, is going to take the value of this slider. But sometimes you don't want to set it to that. You might want to set it so that it's whatever this last tap here is. Okay, so whatever that value is. So let's just set these to the last tap. Sounds pretty natural, right? This is a really good way to get these looping effects and have it sound like supernatural, like not supernatural, but like very natural sounding. So it sounds like it's like a continuation of your already occurring like decay function. You can also have it be affected by the ripple. So if we just wanted to, without actually like having that be a tab, so we'll just do this. Put this here, and I'm just gonna add ripple. I'm actually clicking focus here so that I can drag this guy. No, okay, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna have there be ripple just on the amplitude here, like that. And I'm also gonna change the ripple amount to be 100%, and I'll probably decrease it. Yeah, let's just try this. So as you heard, right, that feedback tap when I said last plus ripple was affected by the ripple, okay? And it's not affected by this feedback amount slider. This doesn't do anything basically when you have it set to that. So. And doing it on the amplitude is like a very, it just kind of like kills the rest of the echoes. So if we didn't want to do that, we could do this like, for example, on our bandwidth and just have it be only on this guy. And then maybe have our bandwidth go like that. Yeah, like that. So as you can hear, there's just like different ways to play around with this. Right? But all this is to say that you have so much control over like the sound that gets made by this, because you have control over all of these parameters, right? You have the feedback, you have like you even have, yeah, just like all of the ways that you could do this feedback. You have custom, last tap, last plus ripple. There's so much stuff. The globals, I think I've already covered a lot. And yeah, so in this version, we have basically the global taps. So that's our time mode, our reference pattern, and the global ripple, which affects sort of all of the ripple rates. And all of these are sort of scaled based on that when we're in the ripple mode. Yeah, so I think the last thing is going to be presets. When you click Update Factory Presets upon downloading the software, it's going to download the factory presets for this version, and it's going to make essentially these here. And that's how you can get the presets. Okay, you can cycle through the presets by clicking Next and Previous. And then if you have a version that's like an older version, it'll say info loading preset from an older version. Things may not work 100% because they might not. For example, the distortion engine is just going to be turned off, and the mix is going to be set to sort of some default values. But yeah. You can also save your own preset, of course, by doing save, and then you can save it. But yeah, so this was Ripple Delay 1.1 beta. It's currently 12:20 in the morning, and I'm very tired, so I think I'm gonna go to bed. But yeah, just before I leave, go check it out. I've been I put so much work into this plugin this year to like really make it like a much better user experience and really make it just like one of the best delay plugins. I think you should check it out. This is the beta version. I'm going to be incorporating user feedback to get the, for the full version. And yeah, I'm super happy that I've been able to like finally get this out to you. It's been so many features added, which means that there's so many features that need to get tested, and it's like so complicated, and so like really making sure that it's at like a stable state to release is a huge accomplishment. I'll be spending the next few months kind of putting on the bells and whistles, like adding things to it, like those extra distortion functions, stuff like that. But yeah, you should check it out. It's $12. If you're unhappy with it, you can just press the button on the webpage that says return, and you can, if you're unhappy with it at all for the first 30 days, you can just return it. No questions asked. You don't need to send me an email or anything. You just press the button, return it. I won't take it personally. Don't worry. We're chilling. But yeah, go check this out. This is Ripple Delay Pro 1.1 beta, and it's awesome, and I think you're going to love it. It's such a cool algorithm. It's so cool. So many cool features. All right. Good night, guys.